Welcome to another episode of From a People Perspective, a show hosted by Martin Hauck. Joining us is Rebecca Price, Partner and Chief People Officer at Primary Venture Partners. Known for helping founders build world-class teams, she brings deep expertise in psychology, talent, and scaling people functions at fast-growing startups. In this episode, we'll explore how mentorship accelerates career transitions and strengthens leadership growth. We'll discuss how young professionals can get ahead by proactively seeking opportunities and experiences, and why rapid technological change demands continuous learning from today's leaders. This podcast is brought to you by the People Group. We're on a mission to economically empower people leaders. By joining our community, you can access career opportunities, a network of over 6,000 modern people leaders, and exclusive tools and resources. To learn more, check out thepeoplegroup.com.
63% of employers say hiring is getting harder. Skill sets are changing fast, and you can't trust a resume screen to shortlist your best candidates. Basically, recruitment's got a matchmaking problem. Enter Test Gorilla. More than 10,000 companies are using their platform to find and hire quality candidates who have the skills they need. Test Gorilla's tests are scientifically validated, and you can build custom questions into your assessment to tailor it to your company. Interested? Visit testgorilla.com to learn more. All right, cool. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of From a People Perspective. I'm your host, Martin Hauck, and today we've got Rebecca Price from Primary Ventures. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've had a super interesting career. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and obviously I want to hear it from you first, and we're going to dive into that, but it's somewhat of a strange tradition, but I like to do some icebreakers first. So as you can tell from behind me, I'm a big music guy, and my first question for you is, if you were only able to listen to one musical artist or album for the rest of time, what are you listening to?
That's a good one. I would have to say, and this may be controversial, but I absolutely love Taylor Swift, and maybe that's like me having young daughters. But I absolutely think like she's just such a modern poet. She keeps reinventing herself. Her music you can connect with like whatever emotion you're feeling. If you want to bop, if you want to feel sad, if you want to feel angry. So right now, I think in our house, and what I'm leaning towards is Taylor Swift, and she actually has a new album coming out in next weekend. So nice. Everyone in our house is looking forward to that.
This is your show, Rebecca. You're supposed to be plugging yourself, not Taylor. Come on. That's awesome. See, my girls haven't gotten into Swiftie yet. They're huge into K-pop Demon Hunter and like all those songs. Yeah. But I imagine there's going to be a Swift.
Those are very catchy.
I'm singing them out loud these days. I imagine that Swiftie era for them is going to happen at some point, because she's kind of timeless now. Like you can't do that much work without capturing the generations that follow, so to speak. So that's a good answer. That's probably my favorite answer so far, because her work's pretty diverse.
Yeah. And let's not forget, she's an amazing businesswoman, entrepreneur, right?
There you go.
A role model too, I think, for a lot of people, like women in business or just people in business.
When you said modern poet, I was like, I haven't given her enough of a chance as like a musician. So I'm like, I'm going to turn on some
read her lyrics, because when I've spoken with men who maybe don't vibe with the music, I encourage them like start listening to the lyrics.
Okay.
I could really jam out on making some recommendations, but we can do that after the podcast.
Yeah, no. Cool. All right. And to the next, I'll be in New York next week, and you're in New York. You've been in New York for quite some time. Your whole life?
No, I grew up in the Midwest and have been on the East Coast since college.
Gotcha. Okay. So, yeah, I imagine like I'll be there next week. What's a place I've got to go check out food wise that isn't like full blown touristy, but like this is the spot, it's kind of hidden? Like what's your go-to recommendation for hipsters like me?
Yeah, I would say to try out like some sort of like market, either like a Chelsea market or like a Union Square market where you could kind of go booth by booth. If you could
Nice.
hit the Union Square Farmers Market, it actually has a lot of like local from like upstate New York or Pennsylvania, um, like honey, fruits, vegetables, produce, things that like are from local farms. And then because I also love to cook, and so if you can kind of procure those local ingredients or like munch your way, snack your way through the market, it's a really fun New
Nice.
York experience.
Nice, nice. Thank you. Perfect. All right. So I'm set, and I've got that gives me so many options as opposed to just one. So you've given me optionality. Thank you. All right. I would love, so you started, life started in the Midwest and you moved your way to the city. How did you looks like you started off in the people and culture side of things when you moved to Johnson and Johnson and you started your career in healthcare, but give us a high level overview of your career and help us get to where you are now.
Yeah, actually, I had a slight chapter before J&J. So growing up, I always played sports. I played athletics in high school and in college, and I actually was always interested in teams and how teams perform. And particularly, like I thought I was going to be a psychologist or a sports psychologist. So I studied psychology and nutrition at Penn. So I was in Philadelphia, and I actually had a mentor at that time to say, like, rather than going from undergraduate to getting a PhD in psychology, I recommend you just get some work experience, kind of learn a little about yourself because it's kind of a big leap to going into getting a PhD. And so, kind of threw my hat in the ring and got a job offer from the advisory board, which is in Washington, D.C. It's a healthcare consulting company. And it was at the advisory board where we were doing research for hospitals and health systems that I started to really see how psychology and leadership can impact the performance of business and systems. And it was a mentor from the advisory board who recommended studying organizational psychology. So rather than the psychology of individual humans, organizational psychology was psychology of like how people come together and perform. It was a field that I didn't know about at that time until I was introduced to it. So what brought me to New York was getting my master's at Columbia in organizational psychology, which was absolutely like the best 2 years. I loved every single class. I really didn't know it was going to take me into the HR field, but I knew it was a degree that I was excited about going to each class and learning about what was being taught, which is my recommendation to a lot of young people when they're like, should I get a master's degree in X, Y, or Z? And I always say, like, the world will keep changing, business will keep changing,
Mm.
technology will keep evolving. But if you follow and study the things that you love and are passionate about, you'll always be able to find a job that you enjoy. And so that was true for me. I studied organizational psychology, and it was from there that I got the opportunity to join the Johnson and Johnson HR rotational program. I
Right.
never had a job in HR. There's actually, as you know, and the listeners to this show knows, multiple functions that fall under the umbrella of HR.
Yeah.
And this rotational program gave me the opportunity to work across all the functions and go really deep in these short pockets of time to learn about all the different aspects of the function.
And what would you say has carried true? Like you've taken organizational psychology. I imagine at the time it could probably feel pretty broad and like, what is this and what's this going to get me out of school to a certain extent? And if I'm wrong there, by all means, correct me on that. But I guess my question is, what like remains to hold true, like still to this day in terms of what you learned back then?
Yeah, I think that everyone can be great in some context. And it is about
Mm.
finding that context for everyone. So,
Yeah.
what job, what role, what team, what company, what culture. And if I ever see someone who's not operating at their peak potential, I don't actually think there's something wrong with that person. I actually think there's something wrong with the context. And I always
Right.
have felt that way, whether it was when I was playing sports or whether I was thinking about what college to go to, right? I think there's a lot of good schools we have to find a fit. And whether I'm coaching people or working with teams, it's about finding the right role for you where
Hmm.
you can be like your best version of yourself.
Gotcha. And so you come out of you come out of there and you're in Johnson and Johnson through the rotational program, which I imagine is pretty comprehensive and thorough and gives you. What are you thinking, and how do you get into the sort of startup ecosystem and get into the like the senior people leader roles that you've gotten?
Yeah. In each chapter of my career, like when I was in it, like I was in it. There was never this master roadmap of like, and then I'm going to do whatever next. And
Right.
actually, when I started at Johnson and Johnson, the tech ecosystem was very young, particularly on the East Coast. Tech in New York didn't exist like it does today. Like on the West Coast, it was starting to emerge. Um, but actually, there was this moment where I was on parental leave with my younger daughter. Right before I went out on leave, I was in a total rewards role where Johnson and Johnson had just acquired a company, and part of my job into this M&A integration was to create a proposal to take the employees in the acquiring company and map them to the Johnson and Johnson compensation framework. Uh,
Mm.
I don't know, for those of you who understand compensation, you have to like map jobs based on role, and then each role would have like a compensation band, and we would have to do some analytics around like, are they higher or lower coming from this other company into the J&J framework, and then what would be a proposal to transition. So it was like 10,000 employees. It was a big project.
Ooh.
I learned a lot about total rewards, have a massive appreciation for that function. But the story goes that like I was pregnant, I went out on leave, and I came back 4 months later, and my team was still working on this same project, still in the same spreadsheet, still doing pivot tables, still making PowerPoints and presentations to the comp committee of J&J. And I get it. It's a massive project and a massive organization. But for me, I had this light bulb moment. I had a 3-year-old, I had a newborn, I was commuting pretty far for work. And I was just thinking like, you know, I knew I wanted to keep working, but I also felt like if I'm going to leave my 2 children at home and go to work, I wanted to really feel more impact. And that's no disrespect to, I think, the people in large companies. Like, I think that the work that I did there and the impact that I had and the mentors that I had were absolutely foundational to the success
Mm.
I had. But I just wanted more pace and more speed. And I didn't want a project to take 4 months. I'd rather it take 4 weeks.
Right.
And at that time, my husband was in the tech sector. He was an entrepreneur in residence at a venture firm in New York. And he was starting to see companies that his firm had invested in have this head of people job. So this was back in 2013. Now it's like, well, of course that job exists. But if you think like 10, 15 years ago, like it was just a role that was emerging. More HR tech was coming onto the scene, which meant a head of people wasn't about kind of the admin operational parts of the job, but it was really about strategic, being like the strategic kind of designer of who are the best people, how do we align them to get the company to perform. More founders were really appreciating and hiring for that role from kind of sitting at the strategic table. And when I heard about that role from my husband, I was like, partly like, that sounds awesome. Wow, like how cool, to go in at a company super small and be able to like shape it from the beginning. And at the same time, I was like, holy crap, like I'm not equipped to do that. Like I've
Mm.
been at J&J for the last 8 years. J&J has 5,000 HR professionals, like just the HR function. So
Just alone.
it was a lot. And there was always someone, like, HR is never like inventing the wheel, right? There was always someone who you could call who'd kind of done it before. Like you always had like a phone a friend or someone down the hall or a best practice to pull from, a deck that you could modify. So I was like, oh my God, going into a company from scratch, how exciting and how scary. But I just knew it was like one of those life moments. One of my favorite books is called The Crossroads of Should and Must. And it was just like one of those moments where I was like, it's not that I should do this. I like must do this. I must do
Mm.
this for myself. I must do this for my children. I must do this just for my own like enjoyment and satisfaction. So threw my hat in the ring for a head of people job, and the team over at Sail Through, which was a B2B MarTech firm back in the day, took a chance on me.
Nice. Were there any signs that you took, so to speak, from the universe to be like that helped you determine whether or not it was a should or a must decision? Or was it just more an instinct?
I think I felt like, what do I have to lose?
Mm.
Like what, if I just applying to these roles, like what's the worst that'll happen is I won't get them. But if I do have the opportunity, and then I think that's the reason to leave. I also was very supported by my mentors and managers and the leaders at J&J who also felt like, yeah, go do this. Like they called it an externship. Go do an externship for a couple years and you'll come back. So I felt supported. It felt low risk, in the sense of like I wasn't torpedoing anything. And it just felt like something like when a door opens, you walk through, and it was a two-way door in the sense I knew I could turn around and walk back.
Which creates some safety in
Yeah.
the decision-making process.
For sure. Especially when you have two young kids and you're trying to be a working mom, and my husband's an entrepreneur. And so like you have to take all that into consideration.
100%. You've mentioned mentors a couple times, which I love because I wouldn't be where I am today without them, and I'm sure you feel the same. Can you kind of illustrate how mentorship played a role in you moving from the startup space and getting into the VC world, and just kind of like showing the shape of what getting into the VC world looks like as well?
Yes. So I mean, I'm on this People Perspective podcast because I am like a people person. I do try to cultivate like strong, deep relationships across my life, and that includes work.
Mm,
And every job that I've had since that sail through job has been through my network.
right.
None of them were like a cold like application.
Yeah.
And I do think that there is so much power in your network. And so the someone that I met at Sail Through took me to Enigma. Someone that I met with through my kind of just networking took me to Capsule. And the woman who pulled me into Primary, Cassie Young, she's a general partner at Primary. She was on the executive team at Sail Through. So she gave me a call in spring of 2020, like, hey, what are you doing? I just started at Primary, this venture firm. We're a small firm. We believe we can be bigger and reinvent seed, particularly in New York. And the way that the founders of Primary view the world differently is that they believe that if we have a strong operating team, we can help really accelerate or hedge that our seed stage companies can raise their Series A.
Right.
And there was an opportunity to build out the people and talent space at Primary, knowing that every early stage company needs three things. You need access to downstream capital, you need your first customers, and you need your first team. So kind of giving me the opportunity to own that piece of kind of what does it mean to not just hire your first team, but to align them to ultimately perform really well. And so having had 3 tours of duty at startups, which is, God bless the people leaders of startups. That is a tough job. It is relentless. It is emotional. It is hard work. I was ready for something different, and I didn't know what different was. I never had venture on my vision board or life roadmap, for 2 reasons. One, admittedly, the venture firms that I had experienced through working with, while I think they did good work, I always felt like they weren't like my people, like they weren't necessarily builders and operators.
Mm,
And second, most of the talent people in venture are recruiters. And I've been an HR business partner and organizational psychologist by training. So I also just thought like I wasn't qualified, or I wasn't the
right.
right archetype for what a venture firm would consider.
And what was it? I mean, there's an interesting, like, for the listeners and the members of the community that are listening, right? Predominantly HR and recruitment and operations folks. Some of them have that aspiration to move on to the VC side, and it would be really interesting to hear sort of like there's a certain level of like, okay, most people are recruiters, or like I'm you're not the obvious choice. What did that feel like, and how did you operate in the first 6 months to really say, okay, I'm going to feel comfortable here, I'm going to level myself up in order to stick around because you enjoy it, etc.? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So there are so many VC firms. And at the end of the day, VC firms get their money from LPs, limited partners, and they use that money to invest in startups, ultimately to drive returns.
Yeah.
And so that is the business of startups. So being an investor and investing in startups is always going to be like the core product or the core business.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else is really adjacent. And that's like like the talent space, or if you have a go-to-market team. And so all these venture firms figure out or decide a business plan, like where do we want to invest? Do we want to invest in other areas of the firm?
Mm.
And why is that like our strategy or our
Yeah.
differentiation? And so if you actually talk to a bunch of people in these roles, you'll actually see that the roles are all very different, because each of the general partners who run the firm are going to have a different appreciation, respect, or value the function very differently. So I know people who like their teams of one. I know people that their teams of like dozens. Um, and so first, I would say like anyone considering one of these roles or thinking about it is to really understand from the people hiring you, like, why do they have this role? Do
Yeah.
they value it? What are the outcomes expected? So for me, when I first started talking to Primary, I think they also were trying to figure out, what do we want? Do we
Mm.
want someone with an kind of chief people officer, HR business partner background? Do we want someone from the like recruiting space? And I know that as they went through their interview process, they talked to a lot of different archetypes. I also was at a place, it was spring of 2020, height of COVID. I had two little kids in Zoom school. I also wasn't like rushing to like leave my job and start something different or new. So I was very much, and Cassie was my friend also. So I was like, you should meet lots of people. Let me introduce you to lots of people. Like,
Mm.
you should really hire the best person. Um, and so while my first conversation with Primary was in April, I actually, didn't start till January, and my interview process didn't conclude until October. They weren't in a rush. I wasn't in a rush. It was, and I think they went on a journey to figure it out too. Ultimately coming back to being like, we we believe and value the role of a chief people officer as a partner to CEOs and founders. I had experience over the last 10 years building and managing talent acquisition and recruiting teams. So I've can do that and have built that muscle. And at Primary, we now have a team of about 10 recruiters who report into me, led by a head of talent. Um, so it's still part of the job, but it is just a piece of the story, where being kind of an advisor and helping the founders on their journey from founder to CEO, and helping them design the right organization and manage tough people problems and scale the organization. I think Primary saw that as
Hmm.
important as the just putting buttons in seats and hiring the right people.
Yeah. I mean, I have a pretty, I mean, that's a, I haven't seen a team that big, but I also don't pay a ton of attention to VCs. So maybe this is like more popular. I think the VCs that I've looked at are more Canadian, and typically they've only got like one or two people there. So that's really interesting. But in retrospect, or just like laying all the cards on the table, makes complete sense. And because first off, just like the costs of using contingency recruitment agencies and whatnot for a startup are pretty prohibitive or expensive versus working with your VC. If they've got a strong team, that's fantastic,
Yeah.
right? And to me, that would be like, as a founder, I'd be excited about that. Like, wow, we don't have to spend, $500,000 $1 million to hire our first team because we don't know recruiting and we've never done it before. And then on top of that, like, there's this was always the thing, because I'd worked on the agency side as a recruiter. That's how I got into it. And then when I went internal, it was just like, yes, there are some good recruiters out there that like care and whatnot, but at the end of the day, the economics and the incentives are just aligned to place people, right? And it's not for the long-term fit, versus like, absolutely, the the VC firms has a vested interest to make sure the people that they help hire succeed. So that's really cool. Did what I don't like, was that obvious? Is that like a really popular thing in the VC space, or am I just like gushing over something that
Yeah.
everybody does?
Well,
Yeah.
I think the things you're noting are exactly what I saw when I came into the organization. And I had the experience of being an operator too, having investors who had talent partners, but we weren't quite aligned. So what I mean by that is, we would have, when I was operating, we would have talent partners from investors send us candidates, like kind of
Mm,
drop us in or parachute in resumes.
yeah.
But because they were spread across so many companies, they were removed from what our business was, what our culture was, and what our roles were. So my
Right.
perspective going into primary was like, how do we scuba dive instead of snorkel, right? Like, how can we go deep into
Yeah.
companies to really understand what they need in these early days? And the way that I came like up with an idea was like, we actually need like more people who can go deep and like embed themselves inside these companies and spend a lot of time with them. But there's a constraint because the way venture firms work is your operating capital, the capital that you have to run the firm, is limited. It's not like a company where you just can have revenue. You can only have 2% of the management fees of the fund. So every fund you raise, you use 2% of that fund a year to run the firm. And that has to cover rent, that has to cover salaries, that has to cover everyone's laptop, right? So you are constrained in terms of your headcount.
Yeah.
So the way that we were able to unlock adding headcount into the primary team, and this was actually an idea from one of our general partners and founders, Ben Sun, was as a pass-through cost. So actually, like, we hire recruiters, we manage them, we train them, they come with a primary email address. But when a portfolio company wants a recruiter full-time, they just pay their salary for that month. So it actually becomes a win-win for everyone because
Yeah.
it is less expensive than agency or contingency.
Yeah.
It is kind of equal to like what the market would be if you hired them in, but it's an on-off switch, right? Like, you want someone for 3 months, great, you have 3 months, turn it on, turn it off, but the quality is really there, and you don't have to manage them, you don't have to recruit them, you don't have to onboard them, you don't have to offboard them. And so these companies, these startups, are given capital to hire people, so they have the capital, and we're just trying to be at market. This team breaks even, but the way that we were able to scale this team is that we have our portfolio companies cover the salaries of these recruiters, and it ends up hugely being successful because not only do we make the first hires during the from seed to Series A, but they often, when they raise their Series A, call us back. And as you're doing a massive scale up from A to B, we know that company, we know the pitch, and we've ended up saving companies like over $1 million of agency fee. It actually is a metric we track of all the hires we made. And if it was a 20% fee, what would you have paid otherwise versus what did you pay us? And it ends up being like companies were hiring 30, 40 roles as they're scaling up to their B, and it's saving them massive time. And the third plug I'll make for it is like, we just have the pattern recognition to know what's every role, or what are the typical roles that get hired for from seed to Series A. And not only what is the function, but what is kind of the qualities to fit in the context of that stage, like resiliency, flexibility, agility, right? Like that kind of mindset of the people who do really well at that early stage. We do that again and again and again. So when we're supporting CEOs in their first hires, we just bring that pattern recognition.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And cool to see like how the machine works. That you're leading the team that does all of that. I guess I have a million questions on that front. Is this is something that your firm does that's unique in comparison to other companies on the market? Like, part of me is like, this is can we even air this? This sounds like the secret sauce behind like what makes like primary so like such an attractive like company to partner with, like from an investment perspective, or like where to get your money.
Look, it's not a secret. We also do it on the go-to-market side. So just like I run our people and talent team, my partner Jason Gelman, who ran RevOps at Compass, he runs a go-to-market team. So he does strategic advisory for the whole go-to-market process. He manages a large team of like BDRs or market development associates that's doing top of funnel work for companies. Similarly, like, I think it's like, it's not just about the strategy. It's that primary invests in having so many humans, like human beings who work for the firm. The firm, when I started, was about 10 or 12 people. Now we're almost 60. And so there is just kind of overhead, not just financial overhead, but just like kind of structural overhead to have a team that large, that not all VCs are like excited about, right? It takes management. We talk like that we're like a Series B, Series C company in terms of scaling, communication, org design, cadences of like talent rhythms, onboarding, offboarding. Like most venture firms can find a lot of efficiency by being a group of individual contributors who are investing and just focused on being investors. We have an investment team that's very much like that, but 2/3 of the firm are non-investors because we are very heavily invested in this impact team, this operating team, which is the primary strategy and differentiator. It is like the kind of our strategy in the market of why a founder should choose primary at the seed stage, because we are purpose built for seed. We have a go-to-market team, a finance team, a people team that again and again and again can embed and be on your team and help you raise your Series A. So that's our strategy that not all venture firms choose to pursue.
No. Thank you for double clicking on that. I listened to a recent podcast that you did. It was really good. And one of the things that you talked about was sort of like the early career impacts of remote work. And it sort of like hurts, their career because they miss out on opportunities to sort of like shadow, get proper mentorship, or like the quality of mentorship goes down in those environments. And I was just curious if you could I was wanting to double click on, like, while I was listening to it, I wanted to double click on more. I'm like, can you go a bit deeper into that? Like, what do you think that like companies can practically do to sort of like close that gap if they're in that remote environment or hybrid environment?
Yes. So there are a lot of early in career people who work at primary and in my other like companies I've worked at. And when you walk into the door where you're all together, like you can sort of, you see the people who are arriving early, working at their desks. You can see the people who are might be struggling or might be kind of pulling out of the group. Like you have those like visual cues to kind of be like, hey, does that person need help? Or, hey, that person might be like super high potential. And what I believe I was talking about that podcast was when you're in remote work, people are alone in their homes.
Yeah.
And so leaders, managers, VPs, executives, like may not be able to have those like cues around like, what might be happening to this person. And then if you don't have many opportunities to show up on Zoom or collaborate like visually with people, you could get like lost if you're struggling, but also lost in the sense of like, hey, Martin, like, I feel like I see a spark in you. Like, do you want to like step up and help me with this project? Do you want to like opportunity to shadow me here? Because I think that's a lot of people will say like, oh, I got like a break, right? Like some executive saw me and gave me like an opportunity or break, and they saw something in me. They took a chance on me for some reason. And so I think if you are leading a team or managing a company where you have distributed work, I think there's just an opportunity to be paying attention to those younger workers and intentionally designing mentorship, kind of coaching circles, opportunities for people to speak up, checking in on one-on-one, professional development plans that don't just like live in a drawer, but maybe there's other executives who are sponsoring younger people to pay attention to those development plans. And I think like succession planning is really important too, of when you think about your future org design, and this is where your people person can help. Who do you think from the younger ranks in 12, 18, 24 months could get there? And really start thinking ahead of like grooming people through experience, exposure, education to get them kind of smaller nuggets along the way so that they could possibly be ready for a job, an upcoming job. But it takes so much more intentionality when you're remote.
Yeah. No, it's on hard mode for sure.
Can I say one more thing on that? I do think it's on the employees too. So if there's any like young listeners here, I think it is on the young people to build their network, build their community, and build relationships. Actually, yesterday I spoke with a college senior, a daughter of a friend who asked me to take the call, and she was just trying to like ask for advice about how do I get a job and what should I do? And I was kind of trying to teach her the power of like networking, and how, as I mentioned earlier, like every one of my jobs over the last 15 years has come from my network. I wasn't actively on the job market, but someone I knew reached out to me. I think so much of opportunity comes from like who we know. And particularly if you're in near like a city, cities now have so many events, young people communities, meetups, that I would just get out there and meet people and be super curious rather than kind of, hey, can you help me? Be
Mm.
really curious of like, what is your role? How did you end up there? What do you wish you knew? What advice do you have for young people? Who do you like? Do you know anyone I could talk to in this space? Like that, building those relationships and building that community, I really think is an accelerant. And if you're working in a remote job and you have ambition and aspiration to kind of accelerate your career, you just got to get out of the house and find events on nights and weekends
Yeah.
to young professional events. And I think there's a lot. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of events out there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've having seen that, I get the same question from, people still sort of see me as a recruiter on LinkedIn, and I still get the, 5 or 6 people reaching out every day saying like, "Oh, I saw you're a recruiter." You'd like, and every once in a while somebody will have like a really intentional, thoughtful message, and I'll make time for them and say like, "Hey, let's jump on a call. Happy to chat." Most of the time, and like kind of this is speaking to that audience of people that you were just speaking to, it's like most of the time people have this like really canned message. They haven't put much thought into it, and it's like they're doing the right thing, but the right thing isn't nuanced enough to actually like, you can't just ask and expect that it's going to happen, because everybody's asking, or not everybody, a small chunk of people are asking, but they're not asking in a way that's like, hey, can we sit down, like have a reason, be specific. This isn't something you can just do a canned message with like 100 people and it's all the same message. You need to have intentionality behind it in any hopes of somebody responding, for sure. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of people who share that sentiment, which is people will respond to a cold inbound message on email or LinkedIn if you are thoughtful and intentional. And I know people I work with, pretty, successful investors who I'll be like, how did you meet them? Like, oh, they sent me a really thoughtful email. So I
yeah.
think people respond,
Yeah.
like, shoot your shot. But I agree, like, don't be generic, be super thoughtful. The other thing I want to say is, and maybe this is a hot take, but I think it is really hard to have everything all at once. And so I work with a lot of younger people who equally say like, I am very ambitious, I want more responsibility, I want more compensation, I
Mm.
want to grow my career, and I don't want to work too hard, I want to kind of clock in, I want to come in at 10, I want to leave at 5, I really care about my work life balance. And it is hard to give people all of that, because oftentimes, or the majority of time, I think if you to get an opportunity to go above and beyond for someone more senior than you is an opportunity to be able to like be seen by someone who could give you like see you in a different way, to put you up for a promotion or a new job or recommend you to their friend. And so I'll give a very specific example. I was working with someone who has been very vocal, very much wants the opportunity to be promoted, earn more money, and potentially move to a different function. And there was this special project that came up. It was like going to be like 60 or 90 days, maybe like 5 hours of extra work a week. And it was like, great, like here's an opportunity. You get to work with different people. You get to learn a different skill set. You get kind of exposure to like very senior people. And the response was, what are you going to take off my plate? Or I expect more money for this.
Mm.
And I, I can be empathetic with that ask, right?
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
kind of want to know like, hey, like how am I going to be able to juggle everything? And am I going to get compensated for that? But I also think that that kind of mentality, which is a very fixed mindset versus like growth mindset, is not the thing that in a competitive world where it's harder to get jobs, it's harder to get promoted, is going to be like an accelerant to more opportunity.
Yeah.
Because what's happening now, so she did not get the opportunity. There's someone else now who has that opportunity, couple hours a week, extra work for a couple months, but getting so much exposure, not just to executives, to kind of other people being like, hey, like she's pretty great. Like maybe we should consider her for XYZ, but also building experiences for herself that she can take with her forever. I think like work experiences is like a balance sheet. Like you're building and collecting assets that you will have forever with you. So just the opportunity to gain more skills, even if immediately you're not going to earn like a little more money, you will over time, that those relationships and those skills and experiences will end up kind of building your like wealth because it'll contribute to your ability to earn more compensation over time.
This is interesting because, like, to your point, right? You said immediately, like, I empathize with that person's, like, the reason they're saying it, right? There's an aspect of like, oh, they've got good boundaries, right? They've got good boundaries for themselves. They believe in themselves enough to sort of like know their self-worth. And like, yes, you have the right as an individual to do that. But if you're looking for those opportunities, like that's, I don't think that's how things work, right? It's almost like as if like going back to sort of like not going back to it necessarily, but you were interested in like sports psychology and whatnot. Like the aspect of like if you're playing a basketball game and you get past the ball and you're like, I'm not going to take this shot unless you guys, I don't shoot 3-pointers. This is not my job. I'm not going to take this shot unless you guys pay me more or something like that. That's not how basketball works, right? When you get the opportunity, you take the shot. If you do well at the shot, then great. Then you'll be rewarded for it later. And this sort of like kind of, I don't know. And it's, I guess the part that's funny for me is like, then there's situations where that sort of environment is sort of flipped and people get kind of taken advantage of. And maybe that was that person's experience. Like, I don't know. How do you balance that from your perspective? Because there is a little bit of like, you can, to your point, you saw where that person was coming from. Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's also the way you go about asking these questions. I think my feedback to this person was, I really wish the response was, thank you so much. Like, this sounds like an incredible opportunity. I'm really excited. I'm leaning in. Sign me up. I also want to make sure that that this doesn't bleed into being forever, or that this doesn't kind of like something about like expressing the boundaries. Like, I want to make sure, like, or I just want to be cautious that I know you say this is only going to be like 2 months. Can we revisit this again in 2 months to make sure that we're still kind of on the same page in terms of expectations and boundaries? Like, I think there's ways to have come at it from curiosity and openness and eagerness than what felt so absolute of like, I am not taking this unless you take something off my plate or you pay me more money.
Yeah.
If you're going to step up to do a project for 2 months, that's a couple hours extra a week. Like, you sometimes just have to put in the extra hours to just gain that experience. You do have to like step up a bit.
Yeah.
And I also think it's reasonable to ask the person, can we check in a couple months? Or even after a couple months, hey, can we check in on that? I know you said it was only going to be a couple months.
Yeah.
So, there's just the way people go about asking these questions. Sure. And sometimes I find the entitlement is not landing well. It's not working not working for people. And so a lot of young people ask me for advice, and I'm trying to help get them what they want, which is like boundaries and opportunities, but also knowing that you have to know your audience.
Yeah.
Right. And coming across as entitled is not going, if your goal is to accelerate your career, get promotion, earn more compensation, entitlement is not the path.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'm not saying like people don't have to act that way. Like, you can act however you want, but it's kind of like, sometimes I see people working against their own best interest.
100%. Yeah. And there's a level of self-awareness that is probably missing, especially at the early stages of a career.
I will do have to say, I did come home that day and talk to my daughters and say, when you were given an opportunity, say yes. Always say yes. You never know where things are going to lead. And it is really short-sighted to start from a place of no and expectations.
Yeah.
I too would never want my own daughters to get taken advantage of, but I also know so much in life is about starting from a place of yes, curiosity, leaning in, going above and beyond, especially in a competitive economy like we have right now, where it's hard to stand out. It's hard to differentiate. Like, that basketball player may have to be shooting free throws on nights and weekends, may have to stay after practice. Like, you do have to go above and beyond and work hard to achieve
100%. Yeah. No, the best players on any team aren't doing that without having put in a ton of hours behind the scenes that nobody saw, kind of deal. Right. coming we're coming to a close here. I guess the one thing that I wanted to kind of like double click on before we go is, just sort of thinking of the future and what you're working on right now. You've got this interesting vantage point of supporting lots of companies as opposed to being like a CPO who we're traditionally talking to that's just supporting one company and a bunch of employees. What's sort of keeping you up at night in terms of the challenges that your portco's dealing with and your team as well?
Yeah, I think the pace and rate of the change of technology is just wild. It is faster than anything any of us have ever seen. And what I'm seeing a lot in CEOs is like an anxiety or like a FOMO of like, we're not doing enough, we're not adopting new technologies enough, we're like everyone's moving faster. And so kind of this like frenetic energy of trying to adopt a lot of AI tools into an organization with kind of losing sight of like what are the outcomes we're looking for.
Yeah.
So do I think all companies should be familiar and staying up to pace with what are the AI tools? Yes. Should across all your functions you be incorporating new AI tools? Yes. Your finance team, your go-to-market team, your people and talent team. There are excellent AI tools available. Tabs is great for finance team. Clay is great for your go-to-market team. Juicebox is great for your people team. Those are our three favorite tools. Not all primary companies, by the way. So you do need to like stay up to date, but you can't lose sight of like, what are we doing as a business and what outcomes are we trying to generate and keep people focused on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there a sweet spot that you've seen in terms of, or it's a problem, like to your point, right? It's not just the companies in your portco, it's everybody. Like I made a cringy face for those of you listening. Like I'm like, which note taker do I use now? Do I use Granola? Do I use Zoom? Do I use Google? Like, it's just nuts, right? And there is this like FOMO. There's like, I want to be using the best tool because the pace of change is so there. I guess because this isn't just like last week, it isn't the last couple of months, it's been like a couple years now of this, and it's hasn't let down, and the things are actually getting better and better. From like an organizational design perspective, like is there how much time, like is there a number, like how much time should companies set aside, or how should they approach like incorporating AI without breaking their business or getting themselves too distracted, from what you've seen as like a best practice?
Yeah, I think it's like, I think there's a few things that executives need to be like great executives. Being great at your function is the ticket to price to admission. But like every executive has to understand the P&L. Every executive has to understand the concept of first team. Every executive needs to have a strong network of like the bat phone, like who do they call? And then the last thing is every executive has to stay up with like the macro trends happening. And that's where I think this comes in. I don't necessarily have like a number, but I do have to say, like, you do have to be staying on top of the news and on top of the technologies that are coming out, just to be aware of them and maybe like demoing. But that doesn't mean you're investing tons and tons of time on implementing and adopting tools. I think like every team can own their work stream, and it should be a part of everyone's job. Like sometimes have a culture of experimentation where employees on the front lines can like swipe their credit card up to like $99 a month or something like reasonable to like experiment with tools and like surface ideas up. But obviously you're not going to be doing like massive change management all the time, but staying on top of the macro trends, staying on top of the news, understanding what tools are out there. I think that's a part of everyone's job. I think it was a part of everyone's job, like, since the beginning of the next.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's just the rate and pace feels like it's increasing right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
But if you probably think of like the tech bubble in like the early 2000s, it probably felt that way then too. I wasn't around them, but like, like, oh my gosh, like now there's new web browsers and now there's new websites. Like, oh, now you can, these e-commerce sites or these word processing tools. Like I imagine like we've been through tech revolution before, and to be successful, you have to be on top of technology trends.
Yeah. If Rebecca's bringing the executive like a new website to use in that .com bubble, like every week they're going to be like this is cool, great, but like we need to pick one and
Right.
focus on that, choose the best one, and then commit to it for a period of time, as opposed to like, oh, there's another one, let's use that. There's another one, use
Right.
that.
And just to keep focus on the results, right? Like
Yeah.
keep measuring results.
Yeah. Fair. Any last words for the listeners? Is there, when people are shooting their shot, any, how do you want people to reach out to you or find you or find Primary if and when?
Yeah, so my parting advice to any like people leader is remember that you work for the business, not for your function, right? So I think sometimes a trap for HR leaders is they try to build the best HR function, but it ends up being really disconnected from what the business is trying to achieve.
Yep.
So one, take your CFO out to lunch, really understand the ins and outs of your business, understand the P&L, understand what's on the minds of the CFO, because if you understand what the CFO thinks about and what's keeping the CFO up at night, most of your dollar spent is on people and compensation. So if you know, I'm worried about COGS, I'm worried about customer churn, right? I'm worried about pace of R&D. Oh, great. As the people person, I can go figure out what's going on in the engineering team, figure out what's going on in the customer success team, figure out what's going on in the product team, right? So take your CFO out to lunch, really understand what's keeping them up at night, and make sure that everything you deliver out of the people function can serve the bottom line business strategy.
Amazing.
Your CFO and your CEO isn't really caring about your performance management process as much as he is about driving revenue and acquiring customers.
Yeah.
LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn and have articles and try to kind of put out some ideas there. So I think that's probably the best way for people to get in touch.
Awesome. No, again, this was such an awesome conversation. Thanks so much for the time, Rebecca.
Yeah.
And hope we can chat again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Bye.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're not already a member of the community, please join us at thepeoplepeoplegroup.com.